We are now going to give you an overview of TechInfo. Remember, it was part of your pre-work assignment for you to review the TechInfo e-learning modules. First of all, how do you access Nissan and Infiniti repair procedures? Now, there are two different websites you can use to access Nissan and Infiniti repair procedures. First of all, the great news is that as a certified collision center for Nissan and Infiniti, you automatically receive a complimentary subscription to Nissan's Technical Information Portal. Now, you can access TechInfo through one of the two websites, www.nissan-techinfo.com or www.infiniti-techinfo.com. Here's a couple tips you need to remember throughout the class as you're accessing Nissan and Infiniti repair procedures during this ADAS training. First of all, you must use Internet Explorer. You also need to make sure that you have the most recent version of Adobe Reader. If not, you can download that at www.adobe.com. It's important that you make sure that any pop-up blockers are disabled. Oftentimes, we will have students come to the instructor and say, it's not working. So we ask you that you check these things first. Are you using Internet Explorer? Do you have the most recent version of Adobe? And are all of your pop-up blockers disabled? It's also important that you have a current subscription. Keep in mind, if your hyperlinks do not work for any reason, such as you're trying to click on a hyperlink for a repair procedure in TechInfo, it is probably because of one of the above reasons: not using Internet Explorer, not a recent version of Adobe, or your pop-up blockers have not been disabled. Also, remember to log in or you won't be able to view the documents. I have to tell you, when I first started using TechInfo, I was always calling them and I would say, I can see this, but it's not letting me view it. It was because I did not log in. It's really important that we remember that Internet Explorer is the only solution for accessing TechInfo. Quite often we get calls from previous students that said that they could not access it, and we find out that they were attempting to use the Microsoft Edge. You see, the icons are very similar. So please make sure that you're using Internet Explorer. Now, when we put in the website for TechInfo, you will automatically see in the bottom left corner where it will say Account Login. It's important that you put your username and password in and then select the Submit option. From there, we will go to where it says View Nissan Publications. Once we select this option, it will lead us to a drop-down menu where we can select multiple options. The option that we'd like to choose for this class on ADAS calibrations and scanning is the Service Manual. Often this is referred to as the ESM or Electronic Service Manual. Once we select the Service Manual, we now have the ability to select the specific vehicle model as well as the year. In this case, we have selected a Nissan Armada. If we just select Nissan Armada without putting in a specific year, it will bring up all the service manuals for all Nissan Armadas. That's why we recommend you narrow down your search by selecting the specific year. You will also pay attention and note the icons on the left-hand side of your screen. You will see that there is a blue eyeball. The blue eyeball means this document is available for you to view. Now, I will tell you, one of the lessons I've learned is oftentimes I've logged in and it gave me a red eyeball. If you have a red eyeball, that means you cannot view the document. If we cannot view the document, it means we either A, forgot to put in our username and password to log in, B, we're not using Internet Explorer, C, we don't have the most recent version of Adobe, or we've forgotten to disable our pop-up blockers. Now, when it comes to utilizing Nissan's TechInfo, there are two different versions. The first version is for older Nissans. In this example, the 2017 Nissan Armada Service Manual uses Adobe PDF. All you need to do is you can select on any of these options on the right-hand side, and it will allow you to take a hyperlink which will take you to that specific document. You can also navigate the decision tree on the left-hand side as well. Now what you will see in front of you is the newer version of Nissan Infiniti's TechInfo. You see, in 2018, Nissan Infiniti upgraded and migrated from the Adobe version to something called the HTML5 interface, and it looks like what you're viewing now. Keep in mind that Nissan Infiniti are in the process of migrating every vehicle over to this platform. For the purposes of this class, this is the version you will be using because we are working on 2020 Nissan Infinitis or newer. Now, there are a couple great features on this new HTML5 interface. The first is title search. You remember the laminated chart that your instructor gave you at the beginning of the class in your workbook? Well, if you're using any of those acronyms like ICC, or you want to use the full term like Intelligent Cruise Control, you will place that in this search bar right here. You will then hit the magnifying glass, and that will help you to find documents. The second feature that you will be utilizing quite a bit over the next 2 days is where it says DTCs. All you need to do is when the console gives you a DTC, you will put it in this box, hit the search bar, and then what it will do is it will automatically research that DTC for you so you can understand what it means. And keep in mind, as we're researching our calibration procedures, ladies and gentlemen, you will use the decision tree on the left-hand side. Keeping in mind that when you hit any arrow, it will then open up and will provide you other subcategories that you can drill down on for further research. Now in this example, you're going to see that we've taken a DTC that the console has given us, the C1A16, and we placed it in the box where it says DTC. What we then did was we hit the green magnifying glass. Once we did that, it came up with what that DTC means. C1A16 radar blocked. We then select DTC logic. Radar block sounds bad. Jake, can you tell us a little bit more about when we see this DTC, what it means?
Well, it does sound bad, and it's a common mistake that you see shops make where they rely on the DTC description only to determine what's going on in the first place, right? So what we want you to do is look at the DTC logic and see that this is not actually a malfunction. That it's only saying that the radar detected that there was some dirt or rain or something blocking the radar that was inhibiting its performance. So I know that on my personal Nissan that heavy rain can actually disable the front radar temporarily until the rain subsides.
So Jake, if we read right here in TechInfo, it says DTC C1A16 may be detected under the following conditions. And it says we should explain to the customer about the difference between the contamination detection function and the indication when the malfunction is detected. So putting this in like collision terms, basically it says it may not be uncommon as a collision repairer to have a consumer return their vehicle to our shop and say, hey, there's a problem, it's not working properly. Well, ladies and gentlemen, what we want to first do before we start figuring out if we did something wrong is look at where it says possible cause. It says, for example, if you have stain or foreign materials are deposited or there's cracks or scratches existing. For example, Jake said there could be snow or ice, sleet, rain, mud, dirt on any of the sensor areas. If that happens, it places the vehicle in something that is called the fail-safe mode. So Jake, what is the fail-safe mode?
Well, it's important, Mike, that these vehicles are intelligent, and if the conditions aren't perfect, then they're going to fail-safe and turn them off so that there's not a possible accident or the vehicle could lose control. So that fail-safe is exactly the way it sounds. It's just the vehicle temporarily turning those systems off because conditions aren't quite perfect.
So ladies and gentlemen, let's go back. We put in the DTC, we searched it, it came up, and what we're doing is we're following this TechInfo repair procedure line by line, section by section. And you'll see the first thing it did was it tells us that DTC means the radar is blocked. And then what happened was it tells us what the possible cause is. Again, dirt, rain, snow, sleet, etc., covering up the sensor area. It causes it not to work. Once that happens, it places the vehicle in fail-safe mode, which, Jake, I believe you're saying it turns that feature off.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yes.
So ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, if a consumer was to bring a vehicle back to us, or even when they're dropping it off for the original repair, if they say that a certain feature is not working, we must first determine if the vehicle has been placed in fail-safe mode because that's the way it was designed to work. We now will start down the process of navigating the own repair procedures to determine what caused that DTC. So Jake, what are we seeing here on TechInfo?
So this is basically a diagnostic trouble tree, and this trouble tree is giving technician information to troubleshoot the system and figure out what's going on. So in some cases, you may even use the work support tab in console to send commands to the controller. A good example of that is where we put a headlight in and maybe it's not working properly, and we can send the command to the headlight to turn on, right? So the vehicle has to get a command either from the control module or from the scan tool, and that's what we're doing there. So we're using that trouble tree to figure out what the fail-safe and why it's fail-safely. And it's important on the fail-safe to remember that trim levels drive what features you have. So if you got a base car, you may have less features than the higher end trim level.
So another reason why we need to use OEM factory scan tools versus aftermarket, because the OEM scan tools know the build date on that vehicle. And the build data, in essence, is the trim levels, correct?
Yep.
Great. So now what we see before us on the screen is an example of an Aztec invoice. There are several things on here that you want to make sure that you're paying attention to as a technician or an estimator. Jake, can you share with us some of the things we see?
Well, we identified that this is a pre-repair scan, right? We also identified the name of the factory scan tool that was used on this vehicle. We also record by date and time on who actually worked on this vehicle and what version of software and serial number was used on this vehicle. We also identified that there were no open recalls from Nissan.
So Jake, you talked a little about date, time, and mileage. So when we're using a factory scan tool, sometimes we get what's called FFD, or freeze frame data, that tells us the date and the time or the mileage that the fault code occurred.
Yep.
This is critical to reimbursement from a third-party payer. The other thing that I know that Aztec does is that Aztec absolutely is always only using genuine Nissan console factory scan tools. And the way that you document that is you put the console factory scan tool serial number on the invoice. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, here's another thing, ladies and gentlemen. I have to tell you, as I've been part of building this training and actually doing calibrations myself, I have absolutely had an oh my gosh moment. Now, if you have a pen and paper, which you should have, you better write this down. You cannot rely on no DTCs as a clean bill of health for a vehicle on a pre or post scan. Here's one of the things you need to understand. Sometimes vehicles need to be driven X amount of miles before a DTC will occur. Sometimes a vehicle may have to have the key turned on and off several times before a DTC will occur. One of the things that I've experienced is that Nissan and Infiniti vehicles specifically can have issues with the ADAS components and there not be a DTC. So one of the things we need to do is, if we're having Aztec door scans or a dealership or an in-house technician, is have them verify the values of the ADAS components. So you heard what I said. Don't just have them do a pre or post scan looking for DTCs. Write this down. We need to verify the values or the specifications of the ADAS components. So Jake, I know you've taught me a little bit about the X and Y axis and also horizontal and vertical alignments. Can you elaborate more?
Sure. And what you want to ask your technician is to look in the data monitor of console or the work support feature of console, and you'll see those horizontal and vertical values of the front radar. If you think about it like an alignment spec and you've got two numbers, and as long as the value is in the middle, then you're considered within spec. That's the same case with radar. So you want to check those values on a model by model basis within Nissan Infiniti's lineup, because they could change.
So again, let's recap that. You can't rely on DTCs alone. So you must verify what are the specifications on the ADAS component during the scan process. And Jake, what are the two features we'll do if we want to view what the values are of the cameras or radars?
Yes, you want to look in the data monitor of console or in the work support feature to see that.
So there you have it, data monitor or work support. You're going to want to write those down because you're going to want to know those terms later on in the class. One of the keys to reimbursement from a third-party payer is understanding how to interpret that DTC and explain it to a third-party payer. Now, when you go to look at a DTC, you will see that DTCs start with one of four letters: B for body, C for chassis, P for powertrain, or U for network. Jake, what would be an example of a body DTC?
Well, Mike, we're trying to identify that path to the damage, right? And a lot of times dissecting the DTC like this can help you define the path to damage. So in a body case, if we took interior components out, maybe it was a hail loss, we took interior and headliners and things like that, it really points out that that's related to the loss. It shows that path to the damage. So a lot of your creature features and your air conditioning and such, even your glass can be tied to the body control network.
Awesome. And now next we have the C for chassis. What would be an example of a chassis DTC?
Lots of steering and alignment components from collision, suspension and things like that. Even ride height sensors that control the headlights can be related to the chassis.
Okay, and then we have P for powertrain.
Powertrain's a little less common in collision. It's related more to emissions and drivability, transmissions, that kind of thing. And, typically the vehicles hit that severe, you're probably not going to fix it anyway.
Okay, and then we have U for network.
U for network is definitely the most common. Remember, these vehicles do not know they're in a body shop. So when you're taking electronic components, whether it's modules or sensors, and disconnecting things and moving that vehicle around the repair center, the car is going to record all that information. And I can remember it doesn't know it's in a body shop. In the mechanical side, we're also chasing a parasitic draw of batteries. So when we see voltage fall off, it records a network DTC.
I got you. So here's what we need to understand. We need to understand that every DTC is going to start out with one of these four letters: B for body, C for chassis, P for powertrain, and U for network. One of the critical differences between an OEM factory scan tool and an aftermarket is their ability to pick up on something called a loss communication DTC. Jake, can you tell us a little bit about what a loss communication code is?
Well, basically, you've got a control module that's reaching out to a sensor, and it doesn't see the sensor. So the door handle touch sensor for a keyless entry is a really good example, right? We RNI the handle, and the BCM reaches out and doesn't see it, says, I'm going to record that and tell somebody about it.
So for example, a lot of times you may have a third-party payer that says, well, you don't need to scan that vehicle, wasn't in an accident. Sorry, guess what? If we're removing a component like a door handle for paint or a taillight or a headlight, what's happening is when we drive the vehicle to paint, the control module is looking for that component and it can't find it. So it stores something called a loss communication DTC. Now another thing we need to know when it comes to DTCs is something called FFD. Jake, what's FFD stand for?
FFD stands for freeze frame data. It's one of the most valuable things to a collision repair shop. And you need to ask your Aztec technician for it if you're using Aztec. You need to ask them, hey, is there any freeze frame data on this vehicle? It doesn't record on every module, but certainly on the intelligent mobility modules, it actually does.
So freeze frame data can tell us things, for example, the date, time, and mileage that the fault code occurred. Or in some cases, it may tell you key cycles, how many times that key has been turned on and off since that DTC occurred. Understanding and getting those from whoever does your scan is critical to reimbursement. Next, after every DTC first starting letter, like a B, C, P, or U, we have a number. A number such as a 0 or number as a 1. Jake, what do those mean?
Well, 0 and 1 would stand for a generic OBD2 fault code or a manufacturer-specific fault code. So it's a fault code that relates specifically to that manufacturer and their control systems.
So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Understanding how to interpret DTCs and how to document them is critical to reimbursement. So how do we find information in order to learn more about ADAS? Well, first of all, the ADAS information is not normally located in the body repair manual. You may have to go into the service manual, often referred to as the ESM, which stands for
Electronic Service Manual,
to find information on ADAS. Now, after logging in and gaining access to the service manual, you need to click on the eye icon. Remember, if it's not a blue eye icon and it's red, it means you probably didn't log in properly, use Internet Explorer, or don't have your pop-up blockers disabled. Now, in this example, we can go under the Brakes tab, and there you will find information on the lane camera unit. The Cruise Control Driver Assistance tab is where you can find the Intelligent Cruise Control or ICC radar, as well as the blind spot radar. All other ADAS information can be found under the Driver's Information Multimedia. This includes, but is not limited to, ultrasonic sensors, backup, and 360-degree cameras. I would encourage you now to pull out your highlighter and highlight these tabs, and maybe even dog-ear this page in your workbook so you can go back to it when you're performing your hands-on calibrations. As collision repair professionals, it's not uncommon for us to have to disconnect a battery to perform a safe and proper repair. One of the things we must do is anytime we disconnect a battery, we must research in TechInfo what types of procedures may be required when we reconnect the battery. Now, the easiest way to do that is to use the word battery in the search box, then hit the magnifying glass, and it's going to come up with everything about the battery. One of the things you're going to look for is a little comment that says additional service when removing and disconnecting the battery terminal. Now in this example, in this Nissan Leaf, you will see that it says when we disconnect the battery, for example to replace a door or a quarter panel for welding, when we reconnect the battery, there are over 11 different operations that we're going to have to perform to put the vehicle back to safe and proper repair status for both safety and comfort features. Now one of these things you'll notice says the setting of the compressor maximum rotation speed. Now, Jake, what can you tell me about this operation?
Well, you think about it, the Nissan Leaf, it doesn't have an engine, right? So how does it turn on the air conditioning? So there's no belt, there's no pulley, it does it electronically. So there are consult steps that you have to go into the work support feature of consult to reinitialize various features on this vehicle. Some of them are done local to the car, the power windows and
right,
the radio
sunroof.
presets, sunroof, right? But then there are some, like the HVAC, the AC, that you have to do with a console, and that's just an example of one.
So here you have it, right? It's not just about scanning, it's not just about calibrations, it's also about performing initializations. Therefore, remember, when you're trying to justify to a third-party payer why you need to be paid to utilize a scan tool, searching for battery disconnect and reconnect procedures are the way to go. Now let's talk a little bit about documentation, right? It is important that we always research post-collision inspections in TechInfo for Nissan or Infiniti required procedures. These requirements should be the shop's additional documentation for the repair. Remember, while a position statement is nice to have, I will tell you it's not enough. We need to drill down and find the meat. One example of finding the meat is the research of battery disconnects and reconnects, which is an absolute must on a per vehicle basis when necessary. Individual models and trim levels may have different requirements. I have seen some Nissan Infinitis that when I disconnect and reconnect the battery, only have like 3 initializations. I've seen some have as many as 15. It's also important that we identify and document any vehicle test drives. You see, some systems such as TPMS, blind spot monitoring, and traction control do not really go active until the wheels are moving at a specific speed. So remember to research each system that is being serviced and document the in and out mileage on the repair order so we can explain to the customer why we had to do what we did. Always research in TechInfo by operation and not just by DTC. Do not rely on the absence or presence of a DTC to identify when a calibration or initialization is required. Research operations and DTCs together and follow TechInfo diagnostic flowcharts and wiring diagrams during the repair planning stages. And lastly, research and repair plan proactively for Nissan and Infiniti ADAS calibrations. It's important that we set the consumer and the bill payer and any third-party calibration partners' expectations in advance. We also encourage you to use line notes on your estimate to explain to the consumer as well as any third-party payers. Your instructor will now walk you through researching a DTC and looking up some of the ADAS procedures that you will be doing during this course.